In this episode of Slow Boat Sailing, you'll learn how to use satellite communications to get weather offshore.
Starting the third night watch, starting day 3, since we started in the kind of late-ish afternoon. This has been a pretty uneventful day. Thankfully everybody's eating again. We pretty much had calms for most of the day. Feels like the wind is picking up now, and hopefully we'll get to turn off the engine and sail some more. I look at the weather charts that we had from, from before we lost cell phone range, and it seems like we are in the spot where there was kind of a wind hole forecast for this time, so that's possible what's going on, although I think our weather routers didn't really pick up on that either for this part. I think they thought we would be farther along. So we were going too far north the last couple days, and now we've been aiming more south into the wind while the wind was light, and hopefully we're far enough west that we'll be able to sail close hauled or reaching or running on our course, which is probably about 260 degrees, but we've been making over 300 the last day or two until we really started motoring. Yeah, I think the other big change we made last night, and we'll continue with tonight, we had put Ben on his own watch, and he's been doing really good, and that definitely got me a lot more rested. I was pretty tired, I think, coming into this trip, based on the weird schedule I had flying in. So it really felt good to get some solid sleep this morning. With the 3-hour watch schedule, you get 6 hours at night, and then you get 6 hours in the morning too. Alright, I've been using the Spotcast motions to figure out the wind angles and directions to my do-it-yourself grip. Suggested by our episode 30 guest on Slow Boat Sailing podcast, who did not have an Iridium Go, and since we can't get our Iridium Go working, it's like we don't have one. Alright, so when I looked at the pilot charts, it said there was like a 1% chance of calms here, but as you can look around at the glassy seas, that 1% chance has happened. So we burning a lot of fuel here on day 3 of the trip, so we got 3 days down, and who knows how many more to go.
Stay tuned for more satellite weather tips, but first, take a moment to
subscribe.
Don't forget to click the bell icon so you can get notifications for when all our new videos are released.
Okay, so this is day 4 in the afternoon of Wednesday. We started on a Sunday. We are about 100 miles south of the Galapagos Islands, and I was kind of struggling with the weather apps for the Iridium Go during this trip. And I really had 3 apps. There was one, the Oceans, One Mail, Predict Wind, and Weather 4D, which were all meant for using the Iridium Go satellite Wi-Fi, but the only one that I was able to get working after 3 days was the Oceans One Mail. The Oceans worked fine when I was ashore using Wi-Fi, and I didn't have to tell it anything special, but you have to tell it that you're on the Iridium network if you're using the Iridium Go. And once I did that, I was able to get some mails. That being said, it only picks up like the mails you've not read. First time I logged on, it was unable to download the mails I'd not read, and then the next time I logged on, it had marked them all as read, which is a real bummer. So if there was anything important there. It's not going to be seen, but really I'm not seeing any of my emails right now, so, and I don't really have my important emails going to that account, because my thinking was to start up a new account that I really only use weather for, because if I got all the emails that I get every day, then I would just overload the program, and I think that was the smart move, because I think I definitely would. So right now I can't get the auto grid files from PredictWind or passageweather.com. I can request them by SailDocs, the email query service or subscription service, and that's what I'll try to do, although I've had some compatibility problems with stuff that I've downloaded onto the Oceans One Mail. It won't go to my Grip programs on my Grip Reader programs on my iPhone, so I'm not super helpful, but maybe I can get some text forecasts. Yesterday I did that do-it-yourself Grip with the Delorme InReach spot by doing like 16 requests for a 16-point Grip to figure out what the winds are doing. We're kind of having problems with light winds. We were motoring for 2 days. Today we were able to turn off the engine when the wind speeds picked up to 7 or 8 knots. We're still would like to have more because we're not getting close to hull speed with that with full sail. So hopefully we'll be able to find the 10-knot winds. You know, there's some have said that you need to go to 5 south. We're about 2.5 south, 2 3/4 south. So if we went straight south, then that would be a couple day, or that would be a day to get to 5 south, and that might be worthwhile doing. Right now we're just going southwest, hoping to catch the winds, but maybe we'll motor straight south, but that also means motoring straight into the wind, which is not fun, although there hasn't been too much wind. Happy birthday, Sayana!
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
Birthday!
Alright, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Sayana. Happy birthday to you. Oh, good blowing! Okay, we're about 160 miles south of Isabella in the Galapagos Islands. We're about 600 miles from our waypoint suggested by our router that would put us at 5 south, 100 west. We're about 91, 92 west, and below 3 south right now. We've probably been making about 120 miles a day. Probably what hurt us the most was that we had to kind of detour north because of the winds. On the first day we had our strongest winds, and they were most adverse, and so we ended up going a little north and making a triangle. But since then we've been kind of picking up speed per day in terms of miles. We're about 2,900 nautical miles from Ivaoa, and so hopefully we can keep up our speeds. Today's been a good day in terms of the wind speed is a bit closer to 10 knots today than it was yesterday, and we've not had to run the motor for as many hours, mostly for charging today. Still, the predictions are that we aren't going to get the 10 to 15 knots that we were hoping for another couple days. The currents have really surprised me. They've lived up to promise, and they've been really keeping our speeds a lot higher despite our somewhat meandering course to get to this point. I'm going to try to aim for a much straighter course to Ivaoa from here on out, now that we're not in the influence of those adverse winds, and all the wind angles are pretty much good from now on. This has been Sayana's birthday. We're at the 5th day, about a 6th away to Hiva Oa. Alright, so I've been working with the Iridium Go for the last 3 days, trying to get some offshore gribs. So, I guess the dirty little secret that all the software companies don't want to tell you is that you can get the grips for free and almost every weather-related thing for free if you have access to an email address. So for years, well before satellite communications was feasible for sailboats, at least since 1999, or it was less common, people use their SSB emails to get things from sail docks. And so you can get grip files, you can get all kinds of weather reports that way. So one of the things I learned with our Delorme was that it's so important to have the apps before you go offshore. And in my case, the apps that I had on my phone were not working with the Delorme, and I eventually had to find another device, a Kindle, which could work with the Delorme. And so that was what I learned this summer before we went to Cuba. This December, we're trying out the Iridium Go to get a little bit more weather than the spot forecast that we can get from the Delorme. And I downloaded about every app that everybody recommended, and also paid for a number of services. But unfortunately, I did not do enough work. So it's taken me probably 3 or 4 days to learn these programs well, and I didn't have that time as I was prepping for this trip. But I did have I did download what I thought were all the apps. And I think I did download most of the relevant apps. If you're willing to get spot forecasts, you can get spot forecasts from the InReach, and most weather routers will communicate to you through the InReach. It's also a great device to communicate with friends and family. You probably want to get the GPS version, the $100 more version, not the yellow one, so people can know your location. The Iridium Go is a little more expensive, a little closer to $1,000 versus around $300 for the InReach. You can conceivably get grib files and send emails with the Iridium Go, but don't count on web surfing or anything like that. The InReach, you can get spot forecasts through Oceans, and Oceans now has automatic that if you don't even download their app or sign up for their services, you can pay per weather forecast, but I have not used that extensively. I do like their Spotcast. But if you want to see weather forecasts over a large area, you want grib files, and to get grib files, you'll need an Iridium Go or an SSB transceiver. Important things is to get all the apps before you leave. The 2 apps that you must have are the Iridium Go app and the Iridium Mail and Web app that you want to download. You also want to register before you leave. If you don't do those things, then you will probably not be able to do use the Iridium Go. The other things, there are other apps that are popular that Iridium Go recommends. Some are by Oceans. One of them that I took was the OneMail app, and then I signed up for their service. And that allows you to preview your mail messages. But you don't really need it. If you correctly set up your Iridium Mail and Web app, you can use the Iridium mail service. You just don't get to preview email messages. So OneMail is probably more relevant for people that really want to scan their inbox for relevant messages rather than just using it to have an offshore account the way I used it. And I've had problems with that app. That was one of the first apps I was able to get working with the Iridium Go offshore, but I've had problems with the attachments to that app, and so I'm not super happy about it, and was not to date. I'm not able to get a grid file. Other apps such as PredictWind and Weather4G. Weather4G's not worked at all for me despite recommendations. Perhaps I got the wrong version of Weather4D. Also, I've not had great luck with PredictWind. For one thing, I think I signed up for PredictWind's onshore service, but not their offshore service. So even though I have their offshore app, they won't send me gribs because I don't have their offshore service. And once you are offshore, it is impossible to sign up because you cannot access the App Store. So perhaps you could have somebody at shore log into a device that is associated with your Apple ID, but otherwise it's really impossible. So what does work? What does work is if you, even if these apps you have no apps except for the Iridium Mail and Web and maybe a grib file viewer such as Pocket Grib, what has worked for me is that you can do SailDocs queries, and SailDocs is a free service. So SailDocs is a free service founded in 1999. Once you get the info file, then you can go from there. You just go info@saildocs.com and you can get all the different weather things. And so it'd be great if you could research the products you want before you go offshore, but it's pretty easy as long as you have a mail address through your Iridium Go, i.e. through your Iridium Mail and Web app, that you could go through the info file for that and then pick out all the products that you think are interesting. You know, probably the one that people will like the most is the command send GFS, which sends gribs based on the GFS model. And you just give the latitude, longitude, and that's all explained in the info file for SailDocs. So as long as you got a web address that's working, then that should work, and you'll get the attachments. I've had problems with the Oceans One Mail attachments, but no problems with the Iridium Mail and Web attachments. And the other thing you'll want is a grib file viewer. I tested iGrib and Pocket Grib, and they both worked great.
None of the satellite phone providers or satellite phone app providers sponsored this. These are my own opinions from using them offshore. You can support Slowboat Sailing by pledging on patreon.com/slowboatsailing. This episode was brought to you by viewers like you and Mantus Anchors.